Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of Westminster College's B.W. Bastian Foundation Diversity Lecture Series for the 2021-2022 academic year. In just a few moments, we will hear from our keynote speaker for tonight's lecture titled, How One Service Member's Story Means Inclusion for All. I'm Dr. Tamara Stevenson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve as the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer here at Westminster College in Salt Lake City, Utah. The theme for this year's series is the counter story, how policy responds to identity. Counter storytelling is one of the foundational tenets of critical race theory. This legitimate form of exploration and inquiry magnifies the lived experiences, the stories, and the truths of structurally marginalized communities. And this theme seeks to provoke deep self-reflection of how one considers the lived experiences of others, how those differences impact others' well-being, and how one can contribute to tangible social change. I am glad to welcome each and every one of you, including students, alums, staff, faculty, campus leadership, along with community partners and friends from near and far to this event. I'm sure you had many other options to spend your time, including that extra hour we all gained over the weekend. However, you chose to be with us. And so for that, we thank you for your attendance and for your support. At this time, I recognize the tribal communities of the Goshute, Diné Navajo, Paiute, Shoshone, and Ute peoples, their elders, both past and present, and their future generations. We acknowledge their stewardship of Utah's lands. I acknowledge our signature sponsor of Westminster's Diversity Lecture Series, the B.W. Bastian Foundation. The foundation supports local and national institutions that benefit, encourage, and preserve the rights of individuals, promote equality for the LGBTQ+ community, and support HIV/AIDS programs. On behalf of the college, I thank the B.W. Bastian Foundation for their longtime partnership with Westminster to make this diversity lecture series possible. Also, I extend gratitude to the following organizations for their partnering sponsorships of our diversity lecture series, along with the Bastian Foundation, Cigna, Zions Bank, and Rocky Mountain Power Foundation. I'd like to thank Sonia Stark and Heather Jensen from ASL Communication for providing sign language interpretation for tonight's event. Also, please sure to get one of the tear-off surveys to share your feedback about tonight's event. So guess what? There are at least two firsts happening this evening. This is our first in-person diversity lecture since before the start of the global pandemic in spring 2020. So thank you for respecting our on-campus requirement to wear a mask in all shared indoor spaces for all individuals regarding vaccination status. Also, this is our first Bastian Diversity Lecture through the lens of the military, especially in light of this week's Veterans Day observance. To consider the varying perspectives within the military, from the active duty service member, the veteran, the dependent, and possibly those with aspirations to pursue military service. You'll learn more about Mario Reeve, Director of Veteran and Military Services, shortly, but I'd like to thank Mario for his leadership and guidance in the creation of tonight's event. So thank you, Mario, for creating a sense of belonging for our students whose identity includes a strong and deep connection to the military and armed services. And finally, a shining moment of Westminster College, or a shining aspect of Westminster, is our commitment to a student-centered approach to teaching, learning, and the overall collegiate experience. One example of this is to incorporate the student presence and the student voice in our events and activities. Tonight's speaker introductions will be delivered by Reed Neal and Gabby Smock. Reed is a transfer student, a senior in finance, and is a veteran. Gabby is a first-year student already focused on her customized major in fine arts, sociology, and history, and she is a dependent of an active duty service member. Please welcome Reed and Gabby with a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Special Veterans Week BW Bastian Lecture Series. First and foremost, let's begin today by recognizing all those among us who have been part of this patriotic family we call the U.S. military. Our veterans, active duty service member, guardsmen, and reservists, your service and sacrifice has kept our country safe and free. Please stand to be recognized. Thank you. And I also like to extend a warm welcome to our Board of Trustees, many of whom are veterans, to President Dobkin, to our military community, and to all our distinguished guests at tonight's event. As Dr. Tim also acknowledged, I would like to thank anybody else who took out their time to learn more about our community. My name is Reed Neal, and I am a finance major at Westminster College, and I proudly served in the Air Force. I have been asked to open tonight's event. I invite you all to please stand for the presentation of the colors and our national anthem. Thank you to the University of Utah Air Force ROTC Color Guard for posting colors I would now like to turn the mic over to one of the first year students, Gabby Smoke.
Good evening, my name is Gabby Smock and I'm a military dependent who's traveled in and out of state due to my father's Air Force career. I'm a first year student here at Westminster and I'm studying fine arts, sociology, and history. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Tamara Stevenson for her gracious offer to partner with Mario Reeve, the manager of Westminster's Center for Veteran and Military Service, to offer tonight's lecture. The Westminster Center for Veteran and Military Services was established by the generous support and funding from our trustees and our Westminster community. The center provides valuable resources and support and a place to gather for all of our military community. The center is managed by Mario Reeve, who will join Chief Garrett for a Q&A panel after the Chief's presentation. Mario served in the United States Air Force and retired in 2019, having served nearly 30 years in uniform. At the time of his retirement, Mario was a state superintendent of recruiting and retention for Utah Air National Guard. He has extensive military and civilian experience, including serving as a flight engineer with Japan Airlines and as a training manager for a Fortune 100 company. After retiring from the Air Force and prior to rejoining Westminster, Mario helped to lead junior ROTC programs at Granger High School and the Utah Military Academy. Mario was a first-generation college student and received his Master's of Education degree from Westminster in 2010. He has 3 grown children and enjoys traveling the world with his wife, Jackie. Again, we are grateful to the Westminster community to have Veteran Centers to support our veterans, military members, ROTC cadets, and dependents. Yet there may still be some misconceptions regarding what military service entails and who veterans are. We'd like to share a video with you to help us all better understand veterans.
Number 1, we are not all soldiers. This is a big one for military people, and if there is one thing to take away from this course, it would be this. While many people, including those in the media, talk about military personnel, they refer to soldiers as a general term. This is not correct. Soldiers are only in the Army. There are 4 other branches in the armed services, and they are very different. They have different missions and even different subcultures. Although we are all part of that same larger team, military people are proud of their specific service branches. Very importantly, you do not need to know specifics about what the Coast Guard does, or what the ranking structure of the Air Force is, or what you call a person in the Navy. You don't need to know why the Marines' mission is different from the Army's. But knowing that these 5 branches are different is the first and important step to military cultural awareness. So this leads us to an important follow-up question. If a person answers yes, he or she served, the next question should be, which branch? Asking this question demonstrates that you know the difference between the 5 branches. I guarantee this earns you instant credibility with that veteran, and it keeps the conversation going, which is the whole point. Number 2, the reserves are part of the military. There are 2 ways to serve in uniform in our country. One is active duty, in which case your full-time job is putting on the uniform and fulfilling your role in the armed forces every day. The other way is the reserves. These are people who train and stay ready to be called up if they're needed. Members of the reserves, who are seen in every branch, train together 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. When not in uniform, they go back to their civilian jobs in their communities. They will be called to help when our country needs them, either to augment a national defense-related mission, or, sometimes in the case of the National Guard, to help in domestic, national, or local emergencies where additional support is required. When reservists are mobilized and deployed, they come home from their deployments and go right back to their civilian communities. But often they don't have the same support or resources as an active duty person does when they return. This can cause a significant amount of additional stress on military reservists and their families. Number 3, not everyone in the military is infantry. When we think of the classic, generic version of the military person, we definitely think of infantry. This is an image probably fed through our culture from the time we're young. But the truth is, the range of what people do in the military is truly remarkable. We are expertly trained in literally hundreds of jobs, from mechanics, cooks, pilots, and sailors, to divers, administrators, doctors, musicians, to weapons specialists, military police, firefighters, and air traffic controllers. We operate, maintain, and fix all types of weapons, aircraft, sea vessels, vehicles, equipment, and machinery. Knowing this, the third important question to ask after learning a person served and in which branch would be, what did you do during your service? What was your job? This shows that you know there are many different things a military person could have been trained to do. It's an acknowledgement or a validation of that person's training and skills and how hard he or she has worked to be an expert at that job. It also demonstrates that you understand each individual job is vital to the overall execution of the military's mission. This will help you to consider the impact of different occupations might have, physically and mentally, in order to be sensitive to that in conversation. As one veteran explains, our bodies are pounded daily. By the time I hit retirement age, I will have lost several inches off my height due to daily stress. Number 4, we have leaders at every level in the chain of command. Almost immediately out of basic or officer training, military people are responsible for those that work for and with them. And there's a sense of real leadership that's engendered, taught, and truly embraced all the way down to the lowest level of the chain of command and all the way up to the highest. Leadership is a very important factor in military service. Those who wear the uniform feel responsible for others and accountable to others. And this is a large part of the pride we take in our service. Number 5, we are always on duty. In the military, there are no days off, even when a person is on leave. We can be called back at a moment's notice if the unit is getting ready to deploy, or in the case of an unexpected mission demand. So even when we're on vacation, we're not really on vacation. Here's a quote from a Coast Guardsman. I am always on call. I can never plan a vacation because an operation can come up at the last minute. Work schedules are pretty tough at times. Number 6, we take pride in our appearance and in our conduct. Military people take appearance, conduct, and physical fitness very seriously. Even out of uniform, we're held to a standard with regard to how we look. Physical fitness matters in a real way. We need to train so that when we're called, we're ready to accomplish that mission. Likewise, we're responsible for maintaining a standard of conduct. In fact, active duty people are held to an actual code of military justice. It's a set of rules that governs military people, and we can be charged with crimes based on these rules and held accountable in court. Some people have perceptions about military people that maybe they're rigid based on the way they look. In fact, we like to think of ourselves not as rigid, but as proud. Simply stated, this is just the way we've been brought up, and we believe that these standards have a purpose. Number 7, we did not all kill someone, and those who have do not want to talk about it. This one doesn't need a lot of commentary. Unfortunately, this is a question that gets asked of our military veterans far too often. I realize people are just curious, but I hope this course will educate you to realize that this is not a question any military veteran wants to be asked. Whether he or she has lived through this or hasn't, it's not a question that should be asked of military veterans. Please don't ask us that, ever. Number 8, we do not all have PTSD. There's a general perception that anyone who deployed to combat develops PTSD, and that's just not true. A vast majority of veterans, including combat veterans, do not go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people might have symptoms in the acute aftermath of any kind of trauma, but then experience a natural recovery process. This is also true for combat. While combat can certainly be very traumatic, it can also lead to great moments of reward and friendship and love. Number 9, those of us who do have an invisible wound are not dangerous, and we are not violent. Invisible wounds of war, including post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, depression, and substance use disorder, are not obvious to someone looking at a veteran, but they are real injuries, causing real suffering, and they deserve the same respect and treatment as physical injuries. The media has created a bias that insinuates those with PTSD might be violent. This is not true. Those of us with invisible wounds of war may be injured, but we are not violent. Number 10, it is really hard for us to ask for help. The military culture is based in service, sacrifice, and helping, or even rescuing others. It is others-based, and historically has not valued self-care or help-seeking behaviors. There's an expectation of mission accomplishment, even at personal cost. Because of this long-standing cultural bias, Reaching out for help for ourselves is difficult for military people. Some veterans view asking for help as a sign of weakness. It also takes a great level of trust for a veteran to allow him or herself to be vulnerable. Please have patience and don't give up on us. Number 11, our military service changes us. That change is permanent, and that's okay. We wouldn't expect anything else. Like I said, it's a culture with its own traditions, rituals, language, standards, expectations, stigma, wonderful moments and horrible moments. It's unreasonable to think that a person will go through those experiences and be unchanged. Number 12, we differ in how much we identify with the military after we leave active duty. As in any culture, some people find themselves truly defined by their service and their association with the military. Others consider it part of their past and move on from it. If I'm getting to know a veteran, I like to ask these questions. How has your military service shaped you? How does it factor into how you define yourself now? Again, there's instant credibility in those questions, as it gives us a chance to see that you understand. We are all different, both while we serve and after we serve. Number 13, our families serve with us. Military families have some of the most challenging jobs in the world. They're subject to frequent separation from their loved ones and moving from place to place, sometimes every 2 or 3 years. It's difficult to establish schools for the kids or jobs for the spouses. Then the service member comes back from deployment and wants to take back some of those responsibilities that he or she used to have. And the spouse feels like, I've really got this process down. I know what I'm doing now. All of this requires flexibility, bravery, strength, and resilience. Anyone who knows a military family knows that all those words define us. Number 14, we would die for each other and we would die for our country. We would, and we do. It doesn't matter where we fight, the geographical location, or the technological or political backdrop. It doesn't matter what the mission is or who's in charge of the country. Why we fight has always been the same. From the very beginning, it's about the people to our left and our right, and any military person will tell you that. The people with whom we serve become brothers and sisters to us, and we would die for them, and we do, and we would not change that culture of sacrifice for the world. Number 15, we've all made this sacrifice for one reason, to serve something more important than ourselves. When it comes down to it, this defines our culture. People who choose to serve in uniform and who sign on that line, saying they will make that sacrifice, they live by a certain code. And we like to say it's honor and commitment and duty. Most of all, though, these are people who make a choice. We've all chosen to serve something larger than ourselves, more important than ourselves. That's a unique and special piece of military culture that runs through everything and everyone who's part of it. We are choosing the concept of service. In summary, asking the right questions gives you credibility and brings you closer to the veterans in your lives. It opens the door for a better understanding of our experiences and our military culture. When you meet someone you think might be a veteran, ask, did you serve in the military? Which branch? What job did you do in the military? The military is a complicated culture, and you do not have to know a lot of details about the military in order to show some military cultural awareness, to bridge that gap between yourself and the veterans in your life. We hope this course has taught you a few important things that veterans want you to know.
We hope that this video helps you understand. We hope that this video helps you understand the military and the military culture. Tonight we will reflect on how one service member's story means inclusion for all. We are honored to have our guest speaker, Command Chief Master Sergeant Brian Garrett, an individual whose lived experiences in the military help shape and influence those that he leads and works with, both in the military and in civilian communities. You'll notice tonight that I will switch between Chief Brian Garrett and Mr. Brian Garrett, and this is to signify that bridging that gap between military and civilian communities. So Mr. Garrett serves as the Deputy Director for the Utah Department of Veterans and Military Affairs. In this capacity, Mr. Garrett serves as a liaison to the leadership of Utah's military installations, defense industry, economic development organizations, and military organizations. He advises the Executive Director, Governor, and Legislature on matters pertaining to military affairs throughout Utah. Mr. Garrett, known as Chief Garrett when in uniform, also serves as the State Command Chief Master Sergeant for the Utah Air National Guard, in this capacity as the Principal Advisor to the Assistant Adjutant General for Air and Commander of the Utah Air National Guard on all issues pertaining to the enlisted force. He currently serves as Chair of the Utah Guard Charitable Trust and as a board member for the Road Home, Encircle-Salt Lake City, Hill Air Force Base Museum, the Red Cross Salt Lake Chapter, Utah Defense Alliance, and the Salt Lake and Top of Utah Military Affairs Committees. Prior to his current position, he served as the Director of Military Relations for Zions Bank. Mr. Garrett lives in Saratoga Springs with his husband Rob and his sons Braxton and Braden. In his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his family at Lake Powell. Now, invite our guest speaker to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brian Garrett to Westminster College.
If I didn't know you were going to read the whole thing, I would have paraphrased it. So, Dr. Stevenson, thank you. Gabby, being independent is tough. Don't run away, Gabby. Being independent is tough, and I want to thank you for your service as well. Because, you know, our dependents sacrifice so much in support of their service member with the school changes, job changes, all of the stuff that goes into that. So thanks, Gabby. Reed, thank you for the intro. I have recruiters. I'm not done with you. I have recruiters. He wasn't very good, but I've got good recruiters that I can put you on. Mario, I would thank you, but I don't know that I'm there yet. Because this started out, it was supposed to be, hey, come to the Vet Center, talk to the veterans on Veterans Day. So I'm thinking, all right, we're standing around the water cooler. There I was, telling lies, all that kind of stuff. And then I get this phone call from Mario, and he said, hey, can you come to the college and meet with Dr. Stevenson? I think you'll really like her. She's our director of equity and inclusion for the university. And, you know, we kind of like to talk about this event and what that looks like. And I went, okay. And so I got here and we started talking and kind of telling my story and that kind of stuff. And Dr. Stevenson kept talking about this event and auditoriums and Eventbrites and all of this stuff. And my head was just spinning with, this is not what Mario sold me. It was water cooler telling lies, not this. And so my spinning head, I went home and chewed on this thing the whole way home. And, you know, I walked in and Rob was in his office on his computer playing a game. And, you know, I sought his counsel and his guidance. And he said, how'd it go? And I said, well, this is kind of what Mario's done to me. And told him what this was going to be. And he just looks over and he goes, they realize you're not that interesting, right? And he goes right back to what he was doing on his computer. And that's why I love him, because he keeps me grounded that way. So I'm still not done with you. All right, so no water cooler talk. I really love to do the there I was, but that's not what I was told to do. So just some of my background. My parents went to Utah when I was little. My dad played baseball at BYU, was recruited, grew up in Orem. Orem in the 70s, I was the kid that nobody could play with because I was from California. And spent my life, my younger years in Orem. About 13, my parents divorced, and I moved to Cedar City with my dad. My mom stayed up here with my sister. My dad went down there. He was a cop who went through his second childhood shortly after the divorce. I pretty much spent my teenage years raising my dad. He married right out of high school, and then when my folks got divorced, he, like I said, found his second childhood. There was one night I had a roommate, because they were poor broke cops, and we always had roommates, and he and a roommate left and went to the bar, and a little later I got a call to come pick him up. And okay, so I grabbed the car keys to his patrol car, because that was the only car that was left at home. at 14 years old and drove to the other end of Cedar City and picked up him and his police officer roommate and snuck them home through the back seat streets in their patrol car. But I really learned a lot from my dad, and I really learned a lot through those experiences. But there was another experience in that time frame where I showed up to school one day, and the school gossip, for lack of a better word, I think every school has one, met me at the door. And my dad had been working graveyards, and usually we would pass, in the morning. As I went to school, he'd be coming home off of the graveyard. And this one morning, we didn't pass. And so the school gossip met me at the front door, and I'm in 8th grade, walking in, 9th grade maybe. And he said, "Hey, I hear a Cedar cop got shot last night." Well, in the 80s, there was only one cop on duty in Cedar City, and that was my dad. So I spent about 3 hours that morning trying to find my dad. It's the 80s, no cell phones. The secretary of the police department didn't get there till 9:30. Dispatch wouldn't tell me anything. Wouldn't tell me my dad was okay. And it was just he and I, no mom, just he and I. And I spent that 3 hours really in fear, and had a really good friend, kind of that first wingman that we all have in life, kind of threw his arm around me, and he stayed there with me until we found out that my dad was okay. And I rode my bike downtown, and they were processing the vehicle, and it actually wasn't a Cedar cop that got shot. He and his partner actually shot someone. It was a guy that robbed a gas station. But it was my first experience with the value of what we in the Air Force call a wingman. That person that's there by your side through those rough times to just look out for you and take care of you. So moving on, I left Cedar, I went back to Orem. My dad, anyway, I went back there with my mom to graduate high school in Orem. And my best friend, Brett and I have been friends since kindergarten, but one day he doesn't show up to school. So I called him. And that was on our 50-foot phone cord, so you could wander the whole house at the time, because that was a mobile phone, right? I said, "Hey, where you at? Where you been all day? Why weren't you at school?" "Oh, I went to join the Air Force today." "Cool. Tell me more." So he tells me all about it. He's going to be an F-16 mechanic and everything else. And that's cool. Let's go see a recruiter tomorrow. I had not for once thought about the military. In fact, when I took the ASVAB, I think I played dot to dot on the little form with the answers. But apparently I did it well enough. I had a decent enough score to get in the door. "Sorry, Colonel, I see this." I was a bomb loader. Does that tell you anything? I got it. I was, they said, "You can be a bomb loader." That sounds cool. My mom didn't like it. That sounds cool. So, I went to Uncle Sam's School for Boys down at Air Force Base. Did 2 years in Spain and hated it, honestly. I know my friends will laugh when I say this, but I had problems with the control that the military had in my life, and I just wanted out. And got in trouble. Got an Article 15. My military friends will know what that's about. Came back, applied to go to the reserves, got picked up for the reserves, and my thought was, I'll just finish my time. Finish my time, be done. 19 years later, I finished my time. Because I found my place. I found my tribe, if you will. And I found something that I loved. It wasn't bomb loading, because flight lines get way too cold in the winter, especially at Air Force Base. Am I right? You've been there, Travis. But what I found was this really cool job called a first sergeant. And in every military organization, you have the commander who's an officer, and then you have the first sergeant who is one of the more senior enlisted in the unit, that their whole purpose in life is to take care of the enlisted. They're to be the wingman for the enlisted. And I loved it. I still love it. I tell the first sergeants that I get to work with that I'm jealous of them because they have the best job in the Air Force. Because as the chief, I have to live vicariously through them when it comes to taking care of our airmen. And so I did that, and my career was on fire. It was doing great. Things were going well. And my personal life was a disaster. I was married to my first wife, had a couple kids, had my dream job in the Air Force, had a dream job on the civilian side. I had the privilege of managing fire and EMS efforts for the Olympics, but things just kind of, the wheels fell off that marriage for a number of reasons. I'll come back to that. We separated and moved into a new relationship, and what was to be my second wife, not supportive. I'd lost the support at home that's necessary to do the job, and I began failing even further. I began failing at something that I loved, and it was hard. But there was a point that I realized sometimes you've got to tap yourself out before, frankly, you get fired. And so I made the decision to retire, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. Didn't have family support. Was giving up that dream job. In the meantime, civilian-wise, after the Olympics, I got to manage the Office of Emergency Management for the state, another dream job, and I was really sucking it off. And so I got out, retired, was with my second wife for about 12 years, and towards the end of that, I'd left the state, went to Zions Bank, had the opportunity to stand up their military affairs program, kind of back in that military space again. And I realized how much I missed being a first sergeant. Taking care of those airmen, taking care of those families, I missed it. And over the course of time, my second marriage came off the rails, and it came off the rails hard. My second wife found out what had been hiding in my closet my whole life. And that was the best way I can describe it is when I was in kindergarten, I had a crush on Cindy next door and Chris next door. And I could see Christopher, and I could see an attractive couple walking down the street and basically find them both attractive. And it didn't go over well, and rightfully so. And our marriage went south very quickly. It got pretty abusive at one point. It was called lots of horrible things, hit, bit, punch, spit on, that type of thing. But I learned how I didn't want to live my life. I learned how I didn't want to be treated, and I learned that I had more to offer. I had more to offer our community and society than what I was doing in that situation. So we got divorced. Kind of began wrestling again with, frankly, my sexuality. Working at Zions Bank has an amazing diversity program. Absolutely, bar none, amazing diversity program. And as the military affairs director, I was the person at the table representing the military and veterans community on our executive diversity council. So it was me, the women's group, the LGBT group, the Black African American group, the Hispanic Latino group, Asian Pacific Islander American Indian, and we had these different BRGs. And I got to be there because I was an executive committee member. We got to go to all these different events, and I started going to the LGBT events in my capacity as an executive committee member because I'm trying to figure myself out. And I met some friends at the bank, some mentors at the bank, and for the first time in my life, I had a conversation about what was really hiding in my closet, besides my ex-wife, who it became weaponized in that relationship. And this is Zions Bank, founded by Brigham Young himself. I've seen the book. I've seen account number 1 opened by Brigham Young in the big book. in Harris Simmons' office, right? How's this going to work? And some great conversations with some great mentors who, again, were my wingmen and walked me through and would encourage me and tell me that it's all right. It's going to be all right. You can get through this. Whatever you do, you can get through this. Because I grew up in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Ask, Don't Tell has only been over for 10 years. You know, I have friends to this day that are still afraid to come out for fear it's going to impact their career. We're 10 years beyond the repeal of that. I grew up in a society that wasn't allowed. My dad's family is Midwestern Baptist. My mom's family is hardcore Presbyterians. Okay? There's a lot going on there. I heard the things my family said about my gay cousins. I couldn't be that. I couldn't do it. So, first wife and I had a great conversation. We tried to do over for 6 months. And I played safe. I was playing safe and ran there instead of continuing to work on me and find where I needed to be. So, at the time, again, just the mentorship, the friendship with the folks at Zion's, I split back, my first wife, we split back up again. And I just finally decided one day, I'm just going to let this be what it is. I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to be what it is. It's really hard in this day and age on Tinder to set a profile for I'm interested in men and I'm interested in women in the same profile. It's not an option, but I figured it out. I started chatting one night with this guy, and I live in Saratoga, and he happened to be across the lake. And we started chatting. We had a lot in common. I love boating. He sent me a water skiing picture as kind of a lead for the common interests. And we eventually had our first date in Maverick. It's Utah. Tried to turn that into a second date to go to I love you. Audience participation is welcome. Because my friends here will harass me, especially you, Coleman. Our second day, I tried to go to Park City to the street festival, and he stood me up to go listen to his mom sing in church, and I never let him live it down. But I met this amazing human being who frankly changed my life. And in the process of that, before we had met, when I left my second marriage, I weighed 300 and I don't know how many pounds. I weighed a lot. I was in a horrible place. And began to turn the corner and take care of myself, because what I recognized was that I wasn't taking care of me. I wanted to take care of everyone else. I wanted to take care of my women, but I couldn't take care of me. And that's why I failed the first time. So lost the weight, pursued the military thing again. I just had an itch. I felt like I left it on the table. And I had an opportunity out of nowhere to join the Guard. Didn't see that coming. But it gave me an opportunity to take care of some unfinished business, because I wanted to be considered to be chief. I wanted to be considered, even if I didn't get it, I just wanted to be considered to be a chief, the highest enlisted grade. I wanted to be considered to be a command chief. So that all started, and then I started coming out at the same time. And that first summer that Rob and I were together, I applied to be the state command chief. The morning that I had an interview with the general, Rob and I went to coffee, and we were right over here outside of Einstein's, and he'd just come off a graveyard shift. I was getting ready to go to the base, and figured we were someplace where no one could see us. People closeted here. And I see this uniform come around the corner and start walking towards me. It's the general that I'm going to interview with in 2 or 3 hours for this job to be the senior enlisted person in the Air Guard. So I introduced her to my friend, and we exchanged pleasantries. She gets her to the base. I go out to the base, I interview, and she calls that afternoon and says, I want to offer you the job. And I said, okay, but we need to talk. She said, yeah, what you got? I said, we need to talk. I'll come to the office. So I went in and shut the door, and I said, before I accept and you officially extend this offer, I need you to know that the guy I was having bagels with is my boyfriend. And she looked at me, and I held my breath because I feared the answer that I would get. And she said, are you going to take the effing job or not? And she didn't say F. Those of you that know, she would never say F. She dropped it. And I kind of went, okay. But that led to my next problem. We all have those stereotypes around us, the tall guy, the skinny guy, the whatever guy. I didn't want to be a gay command chief. I wanted to be the command chief. I wanted my legacy to be that I cared about my airmen and I tried. Even if I screwed it up all over the place, at least I was trying. And I had real trepidation about taking that job because I was afraid of that. I was scared to death of that. And it was really a struggle, a huge struggle, because again, this was 4 years, 5 years after my next lieutenant. And I struggled with it, I'll tell you, I struggled with it for a long time. But I needed to let my life be what my life was. I needed to be happy because for the first time in my life, I was happy. I was with someone that made me better. I was with someone that complimented me. I was with someone that most nights didn't have to worry about them snuffing me out in my sleep with a pillow. I said most. But I needed that. Well, in the meantime, Zions Bank started working with Encircle. And Rob and I went to an Encircle event. You weren't there at that night because you were down in Phoenix. I went to this Encircle event. And Encircle, for those of you that don't know, an LGBT resource center for youth here in the area. And this was our first year, and really doing great stuff with these kids. And we had a small subgroup of our LGBT members of the Air Guard that had been very quietly, secretly meeting once or twice a month, get together in a bar, take care of each other. How's everybody doing? Some of the people in the group weren't out yet. They were out to that circle, but the circle was sworn to silence. So we took the group down to Encircle and we did a tour. We walked in this room and they do these friendship circles. We have all these kids in the room. It's kind of good there. And we walk in, we're not in uniform, and you can just hear the air leave the room with these kids. I mean, just left the room. And we explained who we are, what we're doing, and kind of like, okay, whatever, old people. And then we started introducing ourselves, and I introduced my partner, Rob. One of our colonels introduced her wife. I'll never forget, it was the cutest thing ever. This cute little lesbian couple over here on the couch in the corner just giggled in delight, just squealed at this colonel with her wife. A couple of our fierce allies, mothers of LGBT kids with the group. And the last person to introduce themselves was an airman named Matt at the time. Matt is now Lauren. And she is doing phenomenal in our organization. When Rob and I left that night, I told Rob, I want to get involved with them. I don't know what we can do. We're not Bruce Bastian. We don't have those resources to support them, but I want to get involved, and we did. And there was a point that something struck me as we were working with some of the programs and working with the leadership team. The suicide rate of the 17 to 24-year-old male demographic is twice that of their straight counterparts. And in a situation where they're not accepted by their family, which we still experience, that can climb to 8 times. And it got me thinking one night, I don't know where we were, I think we were driving somewhere. Those are my airmen. Those are my airmen. And it was a moment of clarity for me. One a minute. And that was that 20-year-old airman tucked deeply in their closet saw this big, dumb, old, goofy command chief and thought for 1 second, there's a place for me in this organization. There's opportunity for me in this organization, and I can live authentically. I'll be the gay command chief all day long. It was this epiphany, and it changed, and that continued, and we really moved the ball forward. Our team, many of them are here. We stood at our diversity council. The Air Guard mirrored off the Zions Bank model. 30 airmen show up at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning on drill weekends and talk about programs and what we can do. And I mean, it's not all been rosy. It's not all been perfect. But we've saved lives. One of them this weekend. Last year we had one of our first sergeants come to us in August. My daughter just came out. She is very suicidal. In fact, we feel like her suicide is imminent. And it just kind of shook us to the core. The Pride team rallied around her. We rallied around her family, got them plugged into Encircle, and this was August. December, right before Christmas, or Christmas drove, I was talking to that dad. And he pulled me aside and asked how his daughter was doing. He said, I gotta tell you, my wife and I had decided we had resigned ourselves to the fact that she would be dead by Christmas because of where she was. But because of the diversity counseling, because of the Pride team that rallied around them, got them the support that they needed, got them plugged into the resources that they need. As of Saturday when I called in, she is happy, she is healthy, she is alive, and she's on the road to authenticity. Another moment I'm okay with being a gay command chief. This weekend, got leadership. Some of our leadership pulled me in and said, we've got an airman in trouble. His daughter just came out, and she's highly suicidal. And we went in with that airman, shut the door, lots of hugs, lots of tears, lots of reassurance, and we're right back plugged into Encircle, getting that little girl taken care of as well. And I guess what I've learned through this is it's a team sport. This game of life that we're in is a team sport. And if we're all in it together, if we all genuinely take a minute to care about each other, to love each other, to maybe look at things a little differently, to maybe step back and not be so quick to judge, to maybe not shoot first and ask questions later, we can change the world, we can change lives, and we can all be good people. Thank you. Maureen?
I'm not gonna lie, there's a reason, and I think you know now, why I invited the chief. Sorry.
No, God, you're still in trouble today.
Shut up, chief. I'm not going to work. The truth is, thank you. But, you know,
You guys coming back?
if you can hear, okay, great.
Oh, for the recording? Okay.
Let's see. Is there a button to push on here? I don't know.
Ready on your meeting audience?
Push the button.
See, look at that, look at that.
Okay.
How about now? Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I cried. almost every time I hear something from Chief, I learn more. And yes, he didn't want to do this, but he has a story here to tell. And he's right. He takes care of his airmen, and he likes to take care of his airmen from the backside, but he doesn't realize that the story he tells can save those if he gets up front sometimes. My wife and I, she knows, one of my favorite sayings is to make a difference. I'm going to let her know right now, when I go, I want my headstone to say, at least you tried to make a difference, because I've got somebody who I emulate. When my mom, so real quick background on myself, I came from a very abusive family. My mom bounced around from friend's house to friend's house to friend's house, which I didn't realize until later that meant we were homeless. I didn't have a home. And one individual who served as my surrogate father was one of my mom's best friends. We were in San Francisco, and he was a gay man. And when I met Chief, and I saw his journey, and I know when he came out, not my surrogate father.
You are older than me.
Okay.
You made that hair and all that stuff. You're still older.
But I couldn't believe we had an individual here. He says he watches over his airmen, but more than that, right? Much, much more than that. He is an advocate. He's an advocate for his peers. He's an advocate for the Republican Party. He's an advocate for the Democratic Party. He's an advocate for the citizens. He's an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. He's an advocate for the school. He's an advocate for the University of Utah, any education, life of hard knocks, whatever it may be. So I wanted you all to know why I invited him here. And this is COVID. Right now, it would be wonderful if this was full. But it doesn't matter if he touches one person in here, then he's hit a full life, right? I'm correct on that. So I wanted to thank you, Chief. Yeah, I wanted to thank you. And I wanted to thank Reed and Gabby up there. So right now, we're gonna turn the mics over to you. Any questions you may have for me, for Gabby, for Reed, or for Chief Garrett. Mr. Garrett.
All right, I'm going to outline because you know what it is like that. There is, don't laugh. There's one story that I forgot to tell, and I think it's an important story to tell about friendship. And it's an important story to tell about the value of leadership teams. Before I came in this job, I was sitting in a room, or after coming to the guard job, I was sitting in a room with the general and our director of operations, he was a colonel at the time, and some of our old generals. And it was right after President Trump sent the tweets out about transgender bans in the military. And one of the old fiery generals jumped on a soapbox about how they have no business in our military. And I'm sitting across the table, we're looking at each other. Okay. And then he goes right down the road of them gays. And he went into this spill because it comes from that generation. I'm looking at the end of the table at the general to see if she's going to say anything. And she's just wide-eyed. And so I finally let it go, and I very respectfully said, the transgender piece will define by policy, but we have we'll adapt to policy, but we have an amazing airman right now that's transgender doing great work. And we have a number of LGBT senior leaders that are doing great work in our organization. And they're just a part of the organization. It's not a problem. Well, the colonel that was in there shortly thereafter was named to follow the general and be the next general. And the general came back to me later in the day and said, hey, appreciate you standing up, but I think it made Colonel X uncomfortable. Made me a little uncomfortable. And, okay. So when I found out later, that he was going to be the next general, I kind of went, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know how this is going to play out. And so when he was officially in the slot, it's customary for my position for command chiefs to resign and offer their resignation to the incoming commander
there so they can choose who they want. I resigned on him 3 times. And finally, the 3rd time, he said, shut up, stop. He said, just give me the option. He said, no. I said, okay, we have to have an agreement. I get to shut the door and say what I want. I said, okay. And I said, when I promise to you, I'll walk out and sleep smartly. So I kind of dipped my toe in that initially and was worried about how that would go. Fast forward about 6 months, we had the opportunity to go to a basketball game together. And we were talking about it a few days later, and he tells me this story of how he mentioned to one of his good friends that he and his wife were going to a basketball game with his chief and his partner. And he said, you know, for the first time in my life, that angered me. And I let my friend have it because I didn't like it. Okay, maybe we're in a place. Fast forward to now. He's one of my nearest dearest friends. I walk forwards and backwards on flaming glass for that man as my commander because of the friendship and the relationship and the trust that we have built. And I think I wanted to bring that up because I think it's a testament to the power of relationships if we just give each other a chance. I could have not given him a chance. He could have not given me a chance. And we would have missed the opportunity to form what I think is a pretty awesome team. And, we'd have missed that had we not given each other the chance.
Oz is coming in hot.
Oz.
You better wait. You may choose to give me a microphone, but I don't need. Hello. First of all, I want to say something about this beautiful lady right here. She is my professor. I think we had a strained relationship, and then we became amazingly beautiful friends. This lady has inspired me more than she knows, and I appreciate her for all that she does. Number one. Number two, I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. Any Marines in here? Well, we can't all. Okay. My new best friend. So in 10 years in the Marine Corps, let me share something with you. When you get in trouble and someone comes to your rescue, I never once heard anybody ask, are you Presbyterian, Catholic, Baptist? What is your sexual orientation? No. When someone comes to rescue you, when someone comes to your aid, we say, thank you. Everything else is irrelevant.
Questions? I want to, okay, we got one in the back over there again.
Thank you. Chief, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over a relatively short few months working for the state. I'm kind of curious, though, and maybe you can speak to this idea of giving others a chance to grow, a chance to learn, a chance to accept you. Can you maybe talk to where you find that within yourself to give folks a chance? What speaks to that?
I think there's a couple of things for me. One is definitely there's a couple of places for that. I think one is doing dumb things, saying dumb things because you jumped. I had a really bad habit, and I was hoping she would be here. I saw her on the RSVP list. One of my dear friends and mentors early in my state career, as a lady named Jan Buttrey. She ran the EMS office for the state for a lot of years, and her purpose in my first 3 years of working for the state was to teach me to be kinder and gentler and not say the first thing that came out of my mouth. And it kind of worked. But what I learned is to pause sometimes. You know, Lincoln on Leadership is a great book, not a lot of pages, got a lot of pictures, so it's perfect for me. And one of Lincoln's isms was he'd get mad and he'd write scathing letters. He fired hundreds of generals, some of them multiple times, but he never sent a letter. He threw it in the drawer till the next day. and then walked in, read it again to see if he felt the same way. Obviously, more often than not, he burned it and walked on. And if we can learn that in our society where communication is so rapid and where emails and texts and all that stuff can be so quickly taken out of context, that if we pause and if we're angry, let it sit in the draft box overnight like Lincoln would and give it a chance. Sometimes forgiveness is a magical thing. I had a boss that fired me one time. I hated his guts. And then we got trapped in a class for a week together back at the fire academy. And finally went in and shut the door and I said, "What's the deal?" And we had a very frank, heart-to-heart, put it all on the table conversation. And we walked away dear friends. We won't play golf together. He's a scratch golfer, and I'm not, and that won't end well. But we walked away dear friends with a new respect and appreciation because we were willing to let the past be the past and step forward with the new dimension of our relationship. So sometimes it's just taking a breather. Sometimes it's just flat out forgiveness. We don't forgive well sometimes as a society. And the Guard is terrible. The Guard has long memories because people are out there forever. They know where the bodies are buried. We gotta be better. All the Guards are laughing in the room because they know I'm right. We gotta be better.
Other questions? Dr. Stevenson.
Thank you again, Brian and Mario, for creating this experience for us this evening. I'm curious, with your decades of experience in the military, this is a real question.
Decades. I didn't say I'm old.
I thought I heard decades.
It is, thanks. I was 10.
What do you see the future of the military? Looking forward, even with regard to identity and authenticity, because we know when people can bring their authentic selves to the workplace, to whatever they're doing, they're happier and thus more productive. So, given the culture of the military, particularly, where it started and how it evolved, what's the future going to look like?
Great question. I'm actually watching that unfold before my eyes right now. Our organization was primarily an older organization, recruited off active duty, very senior, did not recruit a lot of people, we call it off the street, into the Guard, and that swung a number of years ago. Over half of our force are millennials. The Generation Z kids, as you well know, see things through an entirely different lens that is somewhat different than the millennials, that's an awful lot different than my generation. And it's becoming a challenge, but we're slowly making the adaptation. I think our Diversity Council in the Air Guard was a great start, and some of the most motivated people in there are our young airmen that want to make a difference. They want to share their culture. They want the old senior white guys to understand the culture of the different communities and the things that go on there and the importance of recognizing those cultures, even simple things. Mario and I were in a meeting one time, and Senator Robles came to speak during Hispanic Heritage Month. And in her presentation, Senator Robles said, if you want to recruit the Hispanic kids, you've got to get the mothers. And he and I made eye contact we're across this great big room from each other, and we just made eye contact, and it was duh. So I had a Hispanic kid out on the base this weekend that was referred to me as one of the Lieutenant Governor's security guard soccer players. We showed him around and offered to give his mom a tour to help her feel more comfortable with what he was doing. And he sent me a text and said, let's get my mom out. And the first thing I'm going to do is introduce her to some of our young Hispanic airmen so that she sees a place for herself in our organization going forward. But it's changing. And like it or not, leadership has to adapt to it. We have to. We have to retain these airmen. We have to create a good place for them to be. We have to create a comfortable place for them to be and do it in a way that is respectful of all. And it's happening before our eyes.
I'm going to actually add to that. One thing that, and I had an ulterior motive on both sides by bringing Chief Garrett here. This is an individual who works amongst all types of folks. Being here at Westminster, I love Westminster. This is like a home to me. Very accepting. I never thought I'd be able to come to a place like this. But I also know that Westminster views the military a certain way. You know why? Because they don't know. They don't know. But the same thing, the military, there's a lot in the military, not just the military, but in the general public who sits there and goes, well, Westminster, oh, it's a liberal arts school, too liberal, and they just don't know. Sometimes they don't know what the meaning of liberal arts means.
It's the assumptions.
It's the assumptions,
We make
exactly.
assumptions.
So,
I made an assumption you weren't going to throw me under the bus.
and I'm doing my job well.
Bring it back.
So one of the things that that I noticed, and sometimes I feel like I'm in a tug of war here, because I'll go to some of these military affairs committees or veterans associations, and I know for me I can be quiet, right? Maybe I shouldn't be, but I know you work in, with both sides of the party, Democrats, Republicans, and I've been in a meeting where I've actually turned and talked to Chief later on. I said, Chief, I feel like I'm in a tug of war here. So how do you think, or can you tell us about working in administrations that are not as ready to move forward?
So I worked for Governor Walker. It wasn't as close there. Governor Huntsman a little bit. Governor Herbert many years. Have a really good relationship with Governor Herbert. And I watched this transformation of Governor Herbert on this issue, on a number of issues, particularly as it pertains to the LGBT community. And he had to face some really tough issues as it pertained to the LGBT community. And towards the end of his administration, he opened the Encircle-Salt Lake House. Governor Herbert came, and the staff was kind of afraid because it was a tumultuous time with some legislation. The staff was afraid he was going to be ambushed by the group in the community that was working this particular piece of legislation. Promised they would take care of him, promised they would leave him out the door in a half hour. He stayed for an hour and a half. And it changed because he gave it a chance, I think. Fast forward to our governor now, I would tell you, that point in time in my life when I talked about my second marriage and everything that was going on there, one of the threats in that marriage was, I'm going to out you to all of your military friends and your career will be dead. Because that was just right about the time the last hotel got ended. Your career will be dead. I will out you and it will be dead. And it scared me because it was who I've been for all these years. It's been part of my life. 3-4 days after the Pulse nightclub shooting, Spencer Cox stood on the stairs of the city council as our lieutenant governor to make remarks at this vigil for the nightclub shooting. And he led with an apology for maybe things he had done in the past or perspectives he had had in the past. And gave a very passionate speech, a very meaningful speech. I needed that speech. I needed to see someone at that level of leadership say that it's okay. I needed that speech. And it really struck me to my core that it could be, if he can stand up there and do that in Utah, it could be okay. And when he
do what he felt in his core was right. And so if you look in his One Utah plan, one of his top priorities is equity and opportunity. He hired the first chief diversity officer for the state of Utah to help continue this work that we're all doing and to do it in a structured fashion. And if you haven't met Newbie Opinion, when you do, oh my God, hold on and enjoy the ride, because she is something. But he's that committed. And I don't say that because he signs me a check. I say that because I've watched, I've had private conversations with him about it. We've learned together in some of these conversations. And is another leader that, again, forwards and backwards, barefoot through the fires for that one, because of the core of the character of him. And I think what we're seeing, Mario, is that transition. Even Dr. What you were asking about, we're seeing that transition in state government. He's a 40-something-year-old governor. Even though he comes from Sanpete County, he sees things through a different lens. And if you haven't met his wife, she's phenomenal.
Other questions? What I would like to do real quick is I would actually like to pass something on over to Gabby, because Gabby here, being independent and being one of our, from what I've met of Gabby in this very short period, she's going to be one of the up-and-coming leaders. That's one of the reasons why we invited her up here. Gabby, what's your take? I mean, being independent, living overseas and stuff.
You know, a lot younger than you and I.
Yeah, a couple years younger. What experience have you had? What experience have you had in the, growing up in a military environment with your generation and what you see with our generation?
I find it very eye-opening. I know a majority of my family is very off-put to the idea of going over to the Middle East, because a lot of people have an idea of what the Middle East is, and a lot of it is based around the idea of terrorism. And going over there and having my parents learn Arabic and learning a little bit with them, and going through training for being a diplomat and living in the country of Muscat, Oman. We went there and we met some amazing people. I was hit with such major culture shock. And of course, this was my first time leaving the U.S. to go to a foreign country, and it took a lot to get used to it. I mean, for one, the times at home, I mean, it threw me off crazily, but the people there were so welcoming, so kind. I've never met such sweet people and such big-hearted people in my entire life. And I wish a lot of people had the chance that I had to be able to leave the U.S., to experience something outside their comfort zone, even if it means leaving the state that they've been born and raised in, and going somewhere else and meeting and talking to people that are outside of what they're entirely used to, and just having that experience to just learn and to take in all of that. I mean, the food, the culture, the learning about religion and how amazingly open they are to everything, it was mind-blowing. And I felt so much pride and respect for my parents and what they've been doing and what they've gone through. And I know working at an embassy or working in the military in general as a military member or a spouse, or even my siblings who are dependents as well, you go through so much, you hear so much, and you're there for each other when sometimes they need someone to talk to and they have no one else to really lean their shoulder on. And I felt so involved with everything that they were doing, and I think honestly it was the best decision that my parents had made, whether or not they decided to go or if they were told to go, but I mean usually that's how it is. But we spent 3 years in Oman, we came back, and I came back with such a changed perspective on life and with people for my age, and I think that a lot of people my age should experience that as well. A lot of people my age are changing, and it's with the time and with politics changing, with all these protests happening, hearing them over the TV from another country was something altogether, and listening to what people outside our country, their opinions were on the U.S. It was a lot, and it was so cool to experience that. And I think if I had the chance to be able to do it again, I would, honestly, hands down, I'd totally do it again.
Have you ever thought about joining the international?
I'm on the stage. He's mine.
Numbers, it's all about numbers.
I'm way more fun than she is.
So my dad's Air Force.
Air National Guard.
So you'll join the army like all the other
My grandfather was Army. My grandfather was Army, and my mom's grandfather was, or my mom's dad was Navy. We were kind of all over the place, but no National Guard.
We'll get you. So, I actually wanted to ask Gabby's input because very rarely do we get the opportunity, not just for our dependents, for our young folks to sometimes to tell us old folks what we're doing wrong in this society right now. And I mean, it's gonna take some change and stuff. It's gonna take time, but they're gonna be our leaders. I mean, sooner or later, they're gonna be our leaders, and they're teaching us, right? I know we just have a couple minutes. I would like to actually ask one of our almost graduated students here, because you're a veteran, you came over here, Reed, and just your take on your thoughts of what you've learned in your time here at Westminster, because you know Westminster is very much about equality and recognition, diversity, and some of the things that you're taking away, maybe that you can combine with your veteran experience.
So one thing that I would like to add about just the veteran experience to what Dr. Stevenson kind of asked about with the progression. I've been out a little while. I got out in 2017, but even during that time, things like Don't Ask, Don't Tell had already been repealed for a few years, and when people think of the military, that's when they think of any group, they think of this monolith. And I worked in civil engineering, which is significantly different than services or other things. They have completely different cultures. Actually, Mario and I were talking this morning about when you're talking about advancement and culture in the military, it's definitely a piece by piece. Each squadron, each flight has their own culture within themselves, and each base is their own little mini economy. It's like asking how Salt Lake is advancing, right? The people who work in Goldman Sachs downtown versus the people who are working on the street downtown are completely different in the way that they interact with those subjects. So I'd like to say that first. And then I would say CE during my time being very much a macho Bravo culture. It's construction, and a lot of it fits within that stereotype. Coming out of that, I didn't realize how much it had influenced me. I didn't even realize a lot of the things that we took for granted until I went to Airman Leadership School. You got to see, even within microcosm of the military, the different people from the different squadrons and how they reacted to jokes or how they reacted to different things that maybe was okay in your shop or your squadron, but weren't okay for the services person or this and that person. So that's a big learning experience. And then with Westminster specifically, my first few years I wasn't very involved. I got here in 2019 in the spring, so I had like a full year before COVID happened. And like most veterans, I didn't take advantage of my time in college. A lot of non-traditional students don't. They see it as I commute back and forth to school. It's kind of like a job. I don't really interact with people. There's an age difference. There's lots of excuses not to get involved. Getting involved in ASW, which is the student government here, and using my ability through learning finance and things to actually help the student government, getting involved with Dr. Stevenson and Dr. Tim has been an amazing experience. I wish I would have done it earlier, but it's all the same.
Thanks, Ruth. Before we wrap up tonight, what I would like to do is there any other questions that you may have for Chief Garrett for the things that he's brought forth, or myself, or any of our folks here? Okay, with that, I want to thank you all, and I specifically want to thank Dr. Stevenson for allowing us this venue, this opportunity, and for all of you that you took your time to come and listen, and hopefully everybody gets a chance to spread what you've learned here and make that difference. Most importantly, one of my mentors, and one of my most important mentors, Chief Brian Garrett, for sharing. He doesn't like to speak about himself, but he's, like I said, he's got a story to tell, and I know kind of had to pry it out of him a little bit, but I think we're all a little bit better for him. So thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much.
Just real quickly, before Dr. Stevenson comes up, I'll thank you. I know that it's over, but I won't forgive you, even though I think forgiveness is powerful. I want to thank my friends, my women, for coming. I want to thank the folks that I had the privilege of meeting you for coming. And most importantly, I want to thank my husband.
So please give another round of applause for responsible for making this night happen. I had to manage my expectations about attendance, but I will tell you, I leave here with a happy and thankful heart for what we have captured here tonight. It is going to be recorded, it has been recorded, and will be available on the college's official YouTube channel. But I know that this has been an amazing experience that more people will hear, and I echo Mario when he says, Brian, you have a story to tell. And I hope that you know that the book is in you. And I think the title is going to have something with wingman in it. But it's in you to do, and people need to hear your story. I just want to remind you, please, before you leave tonight, to please do the tear-off survey so that we can know how this experience was for you tonight. We're going to have a Veterans Day observance this Thursday at noon in our Circle Drive on campus, and I think you are all welcome to attend. And our next Bastian event will take place in January 2022 with our Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Week. So with that said, you have made history tonight at Westminster, being our first in-person event since spring 2020 with the pandemic. So thank you for being part of this audience tonight. Be safe and good night.
Marine birthday. This